Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. So someone asked me how I deal with Painwheel and Parallel Realms, so I figured I may as well give an explanation as for what it is that I do to deal with her, or who it is that I use rather. So yeah, so the thing that makes Painwheel really annoying to deal with in Parallel Realms, especially in No Mercy, is her Marquee ability Tainted Blood, which makes it so whenever she gets hit by a critical hit, 100% of that damage gets reflected back onto the enemy. Now, Painwheel isn't known for being the tankiest character, so under most circumstances, this isn't really that big of a deal. But unfortunately, in modes like Parallel Realms, especially in No Mercy, where she gets a huge amount of HP from one of the match modifiers, it can be really dangerous. There have been so many situations where I've dealt a critical hit to Painwheel and No Mercy, and I've taken an insane amount of damage and barely taken off any of hers. So yeah, I really do not like fighting Painwheel in No Mercy. But this is also something you kind of have to deal with in prize fights as well if you get a really high streak, so yeah. Anyways, as for how I deal with her, my main go-to is to use Final Fang Valentine for two big reasons. Okay, so for the first thing, Valentine's character ability makes it so the damage that she receives, most of it is considered scratch damage, and because of her ability, she's able to recover some of that damage whenever she deals damage. So this of course allows her to heal some of the damage that she's taken from Tainted Blood. Now the next big reason is Final Fang's signature ability itself, 1001 Techniques. When the opponent gains a buff, mirror one of their buffs and inflict curse for 7 seconds. 20% chance on hit to inflict a random debuff for 15 seconds while the opponent is suffering from a debuff. So Final Fang's ability is really handy here because if you can get off some bleed, then you can chip away at Painwheel's health without having to hit her. Now in No Mercy, there is a match modifier that makes it so any stack of bleed that the enemy receives is converted into a stack of regen, but Final Fang's ability allows her to not only copy the stack of regen, but also inflict curse on the enemy as soon as they gain that stack of regen. And even with that match modifier, as long as the enemy is inflicted with curse, they are susceptible to bleed. So in that way, it's actually not that hard to inflict bleed with Final Fang, even with that annoying match modifier. Plus, since she can mirror enemy buffs, she can also heal herself with that regen, which is pretty handy. Valentine's Marquee ability ICU also makes it so whenever she gets hit with the debuff, she gains heavy regen. Plus, if you're able to activate her prestige ability, she gets even more regenerating power. So with all of that combined, it should make it a lot easier to deal with Painwheel. Final Fang is pretty much my main go-to whenever I fight Painwheel pretty much anywhere, but obviously if you don't have Final Fang, then that's not really an option for you. One thing that I've been doing somewhat recently is that I've been using Beowulf to deal with Painwheel, and the reason for that is because throws in this game are unable to crit, or something like that. I don't fully know the difference between all of the moves in this game, so I actually don't know what's considered a throw and what isn't, but one thing I do know is that Wolf Shoot will never crit. So if you can just Wolf Shoot spam Painwheel, you'll never have to worry about Tainted Blood. And of course, once you reach hype mode, you can just spam throws. So yeah, that's another way to deal with Painwheel. Another variant that I kind of like to use, though it's a bit risky, is Locked In. So Locked In's ability, Power Hour, while near a tier, 100% chance for special moves to grant haste for 15 seconds and remove one opponent buff. While at least one tier is on stage, critical hits grant invincible for 1 second, and 10% of all crit damage dealt is regained as health. So if you're using Locked In, as long as there is a tier on stage, your crits will not hurt you because she will gain invincibility before Tainted Blood can take effect. And Parasoul has moves that allow you to just spawn tiers without having to hit the enemy at all, so yeah, she's another pretty good choice. And the last variant that I like to use, which is something that I don't necessarily ever recommend, and honestly I only ever really use her against Painwheel and No Mercy, is Cosmic Rebel. So Cosmic Rebel's ability is Force of Will. The 10th non-projectile combo hit inflicts Death Mark for 15 seconds and Fatigue for 15 seconds. Critical hits grant immunity for 5 seconds, invincible for 1 second, and 25% increased crit damage while near an opponent suffering from Death Mark. So like Locked In, under the right circumstances, she's able to gain invincibility from her critical hits. Unfortunately, Cosmic Rebel's condition is that the enemy has to have Death Mark in order for that to happen, which of course, unless you're relying on other variants, it requires her to actually hit the enemy, which can be extremely dangerous if you're fighting Painwheel. But with that being said, in Parallel Realms, there is an artifact which makes it so the enemy is stuck with a permanent Death Mark. That artifact makes fighting Painwheel so much easier with Cosmic Rebel because it's a lot easier to actually gain invincibility. One thing to note note though is that if you're going to use Cosmic Rebel for this crazy strategy, you do have to be near the opponent in order for her invincibility to kick in, so just keep that in mind. If you're not close enough for her ability to activate and you manage to get some critical hits in, you will probably die. But yeah, those are the main ways that I deal with Painwheel in Parallel Realms. Although 9 times out of 10, I just end up using Final Fang. Of course, those aren't the only ways to deal with Painwheel, but those are just my personal methods. I also don't have any critless builds, so that's the reason that I would never actually use a critless build, although that is something that was recommended to me for a very long time. But yeah, hopefully you guys found this video helpful, and I guess that's gonna be it for now, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.